Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the punk rock mockumentary, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Vontae for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you'd like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Great Rock and Roll Swindle, this is an oddity, and it is absolutely an acquired taste, and I don't really have much of a taste for this film. I wasn't into this. I wouldn't say it was entirely terrible. It was worth watching for some of the animated segments with the Sex Pistols, some of the concert footage of the Sex Pistols, some of the other little interview bits, but I didn't really care for it as a whole because of the fact that it's just so completely and utterly unfocused and just way too chaotic for my tastes. And it's directed by Julien Temple, who I think he might have done some stuff with the Sex Pistols before this, maybe some music videos, some other things. And this is his directorial debut, and he's no Penelope Spheris. Like, Penelope Spheris started off with a really incredible, impressive directorial debut with her documentary, The Decline of Western Civilization Part 1. This is amateur hour, and the best parts of this film aren't even stuff that Julien even shot. It's other concert footage that I believe other directors shot, or it's other news footage that he didn't even shoot at all, and it's animated segments that he probably wasn't even that involved with. So the scenes that he actually directs in this, it's pretty pitiful, in my opinion. Like, it's really trashy, it's really low rent, and I know it's a low budget film, but there's no sense of style here, there's no sense of flair, and honestly, the scenes that he directs, they don't really match the live wire energy that the Sex Pistols project on stage or in their music. So when you see the scenes that feature some of the members of the Sex Pistols trying to act and failing miserably, coupled with really poor direction, it just turns into something that isn't cool to me. I thought it was more lame than anything else. It made the Sex Pistols look more like posers than they actually were. And there's this whole underlying narrative with this documentary that is basically painting them out as posers too, which just makes it for a very awkward watch. And the mockumentary angle is not very good, and I'll get to that when I talk about the script. But the direction, from a visual standpoint, it's not a good looking movie. It really looks like something that you would have seen from your average porno at that time. Like, you could have hired any porno director who was available to work that day, and you would have gotten the same level of quality when it comes to the direction. And I think that's disappointing because I feel the Sex Pistols, it would have been really cool to have seen a director direct them and shoot footage with them and do a film featuring them that has a lot of style and a lot of flair and a lot of talent behind it. But instead, you just got a guy who's just basically starting out and is thrown in the deep end, and he's he's not doing so well. He's not doing so hot. He's taking in a lot of water. He's starting to choke, and it's just one of those things where the direction. I know some people might disagree, but I think the direction in this is really bad. I think it's a very poorly directed film, and it just makes everything worse than I think it needed to be. Like, I think a more competent, more skilled director would have helped this film. But I also feel that a more competent, skilled director might not have wanted to work with the Sex Pistols, especially with Sid Vicious because of his reputation. And I think that led to the people behind this film kind of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're like, well, we want to do this, but we can't really get anyone else. So I guess, hey, Julien, here you go, figure it out. And he also wrote the film, and he's not that great of a writer either, and that also shows. It's a mockumentary in name only because it's barely a mockumentary. It's barely even a documentary to begin with. It's more of a bunch of music videos. Really, the whole film plays out like an extended music video. And that makes it pretty hard to watch at times because it's really slow. And it gets boring. I never thought I'd say that about a Sex Pistols movie, but I'm saying that. It gets boring because you're like, okay, yeah, I've seen that footage of that concert. I've seen this before. All right, okay, it's nice to listen to this music. But anytime that it would start to transition to its story, uh, the lack thereof, it was pretty painful to watch to me. A lot of bad acting, stilted writing. It deals with the guitarist Steve Jones playing a shady private detective who is going through a series of different little skits to try to uncover the truth about the band. In between, you have the drummer Paul Cook, Sid Vicious, who play smaller roles. The band's manager Malcolm McLaren is featured as the embezzler, the man who manipulates the Sex Pistols. There's a bunch of other people who have little cameos, like Ronnie Biggs, Edward Tudor Pole, a sex film star named Mary Millington, Irene Handel, Liz Fraser are also in it. Johnny Rotten refused to have anything to do with the movie, stating there was a pile of rubbish. And you know what? I think he was right, considering what ultimately came from this. Just from the very beginning, it just starts off really strange and just out of out of the Twilight Zone almost. Well, the Twilight Zone is too classy. It's like it honestly starts out like trashy horror story from Penthouse magazine back in the day. And because you have this guy who's got a mask on with a zipper face, and he's narrating, he's speaking a bunch of weird nonsense, and then it transitions to a scene that's supposed to take place in the past when the Brits were having a revolution of sorts, but the whole point is that they're burning and destroying uh, paper mache representations of the Sex Pistols. And throughout the film, there's these different guidelines or these different rules for swindling the rock and roll industry that are detailed by the manager. And there's these little bits with the guitar with well, he's not a good I don't think yeah, it's a guitarist. He is a guitarist, Steve Jones, and he's this private eye who's doing his investigating, but the investigation is never really that clear. It's just one of the, it you just kind of get the vibe that it's like, okay, what is he investigating? Is he investigating why the Sex Pistols broke up, or or is he trying to get them back together? Like, I never really understood precisely which thing was which. I do believe there was a decent amount that was more about how they got away with it, how they pulled off this great rock and roll swindle, and there's just a lot of loosely connected bits and pieces when it comes to the script and little skits that I didn't find funny at all. There's this little person in drag that continuously shows up throughout the movie and doesn't really add anything to the film. Just there, just to be strange and weird and punk. There's also this boy who's also wearing makeup and has his hair styled in a punk style, and there's these different characters, but you never really get to know them, and you aren't even necessarily 100% sure what they're doing or what their purpose is in the film. And the mockumentary angle, like I said, it's pretty much non-existent. It's not a documentary. There's not really much of a clear focus about it other than this vague concept of how the Sex Pistols were created and how they were designed to just swindle the rock and roll industry. And there's references to stuff like Who Killed Bambi, which was going to be an actual Sex Pistols film, which was written by the late Roger Ebert. Yes, the same Roger Ebert who would go on to become a pretty popular film critic. He wrote a script called Who Killed Bambi. I think it was also known as Anarchy in the UK, and it was going to be a Sex Pistols movie. Fox had optioned it, and this was during the height of the Sex Pistols' popularity. They even had hired a director. It was going to be something along the lines of A Hard Day's Night, the Beatles movie, but with the Sex Pistols. But the Sex Pistols were so difficult to work with, and it became such a hard shoot that there was like only 3 days of shooting that was done before the plug was ultimately pulled. And the director didn't even shoot scenes with the Sex Pistols because right off the bat, like the band was already antagonizing and harassing the guy, especially Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten, and making his life miserable. So no wonder the film never got off the ground. But Who Killed Bambi is a reference to that movie that it never actually happened, and that is one of the worst scenes in the entire film to me. Because not only do you have this just weird thing where Steve Jones is now out of character and he's playing himself watching this movie that doesn't exist, but it's just a bunch of random footage of him and this other bandmate and their friends in Brazil, or is it no? It's Rio in Rio de Janeiro, and there's even footage of people at a nude beach, and you get to see a bunch of guys, twigs and berries, which I definitely didn't need to see, or guys, pale, pasty white asses, and you also have this horrible musical number that keeps popping up during this segment, where I just I absolutely cannot even fathom why anyone behind the creation of this musical number thought that this was a winner. It's called Who Killed Bambi, and it's just the guy. There's this guy, I think he's a punk rocker, and he's behind the counter at the movie theater, and he's just going, "Who killed Bambi? Who killed Bambi? Bambi, Bambi, oh baby, baby." It's just so fucking irritating. Like I just could not fucking stand that song. That song and that whole sequence is honestly one of the most irritating things that I've seen in a while. Um, and it wasn't even cool. It wasn't even like cool punk. Like it was just lame. And there were other bits too. Like it was interesting to see Sid Vicious and him doing this lip sync in front of a mirror. But the song sucked. It was like some cover of some old 50s song. And there were just a handful of other scenes that just didn't really impress me that much. A lot of the stuff involving the plot, a lot of the stuff involving the different rules for swindling the rock and roll industry, I just thought were pretty naff. I thought they were just not really that interesting or that innovative. Seemed like a lot of stuff that I think the manager pulled out of his ass. This whole film felt like it was just a vanity project for the manager, really, and like a couple surviving members of the Sex Pistols, and it just had that whole vibe to it, and it definitely is there in the script, and it just makes for not a very satisfying documentary or a film. Like I said, there's barely any plot to speak of, and yeah, there's a lot of nudity. There's a lot of Sex Pistols songs. There's a lot of concert footage. There's other bands that make appearances, uh, but there's not really a lot of substance there. It's a lot of flash, but nothing of any substance. And you have these attempts at humor that just aren't funny in the slightest, and you get some bits with the Sex Pistols in animated form that's fun, almost to the point where I wish the entire movie was just an animated Sex Pistols film. Like I would have I honestly would have rather watched an entire film in that style of animation than whatever we got here in terms of the live action footage. And it also is one of those things where it doesn't really have much of an actual ending. It just stops. You had the stuff with the Who Killed Bambi bit. Then you cut to Sid Vicious in France, which was, I would say, was one of the highlights of the film, is the scenes with Sid Vicious in France, leading up to his show over in France, which is the setting for the My Way music video, which is also another highlight of the film. And the movie pretty much ends with the My Way music video. And it's like, okay, all right. But it doesn't really feel like it ties together with whatever narrative they're trying to put together, if there even is one to begin with. So it just feels like, oh, hey, here's that cool music video. It's like, all right, cool, but I could watch that on its own. I don't have to watch that here in this jumbled mess of a so-called documentary or mockumentary film. Um, it does seem like a film that just relies purely on aesthetic and literally nothing else. And the aesthetic can only take you so far, and I think the punk rock aesthetic and the Sex Pistols aesthetic is decent, but I don't think it's strong enough to carry an entire movie. And I definitely do feel that this is evidence of that. But I'm also not the intended target audience, and I know that there's a lot of people who have a lot of nostalgia and a lot of connection with this particular documentary, but I just thought it was I genuinely thought it was a mess. It was just all over the place, and it definitely starts with the script. Like the way it starts, the way that it continues, and just fits and spurts. And here's a little segment with the guitarist who's playing a private investigator trying to investigate something, but whatever it is isn't really that clear. The manager talking about different rules and how to swindle the rock and roll industry and how the Sex Pistols were created. And then you have different concert footage of the Sex Pistols performing at different venues, and animated segments and interviews with other people who aren't fans of the Sex Pistols, or other news footage. And it just leads to something that is just pure and utter chaos, and it's not the kind of chaos that's controlled in any way. I prefer controlled chaos when it comes to films. I don't want just nothing but utter chaos, because it just makes everything just so hard to follow. And yeah, I felt this was an incredibly hard film to follow, and it was a hard film to watch for that reason, because you're just like, what is going on? And why should I even care? And you're just only mildly entertained by listening to some good punk rock. It's almost like it would have just been better if it was just a music video, like and not a movie. And it has a cast, but let's be honest here, these aren't real actors. I mean, Malcolm McLaren, who plays Embezzler, Steve Jones as the crook, Paul Cook as the team maker, Sid Vicious as the gimmick, Johnny Rotten as a collaborator in archive footage, Ronnie Biggs as the exile, Mary Millington is Mary, Irene Handel is an usher. Um, Pretty much everyone here, they're not actors, and it definitely does show. I can't really think of a single performance from any of the performers in this film that had lines of dialogue that was actually even remotely good. Uh, they're another reason why I felt like I was watching a Sex Pistols porno movie rather than an actual mockumentary or an actual film, because the level of acting was that of your average porno. And the narration by Malcolm McLaren was pretty bad, like especially in the beginning when I believe he was the one who was wearing the weird mask, and I was like, I couldn't understand what the hell he was saying. And there were other moments where you're like, what are you even babbling about? And the best part of it is the music, for sure. Like the music, I mean, even that I think is kind of hit and miss though. Like there's some stuff like from the Black Arabs, which I wasn't really big on, and there's some other songs that weren't really that great. But the Sex Pistols songs, like those are the ones that I definitely would say were the best. You know, the hits, the ones that most fans know, as well as some of the B-side stuff. And it was worth a watch just to see some of that concert footage again and just to hear some good punk rock. But at the same time, if I want that, I can listen to the album, or I can watch some of the other music videos up by themselves. I don't, or the concert footage. I don't have to watch a really amateurish porno movie level quality pseudo mockumentary along with that. So I know for some people though that, they think this is, I'm being a little too harsh, but I'm all about being honest here. It's all about honesty when it comes to my reviews. And honestly, yeah, I wasn't a big fan of this. Like I thought, I honestly felt I was swindled. Maybe that was the point. They made a bad documentary that isn't even effective as a mockumentary, just as a joke, as a prank, as one last bit of rebellion. And I think that might have been the thought process, but I think you could have done it in a way that was more entertaining and was more thought provoking, was more engaging or compelling overall. Because what you have here is it's just a bunch of random, loosely connected segments with bad acting and bad directing, spliced together with some concert footage and some other news footage and other bits and pieces. So yeah, it's in my opinion a film that I would only recommend if you're a diehard Sex Pistols fan. Like if you're a diehard Sex Pistols fan, you probably you've already seen this and you're already a fan and you've seen it numerous times. But if you're just kind of, I don't know, like a casual fan of the Sex Pistols, like I don't think there's a lot here for you to really get into. But that's just me. Anyway, that's my opinion and that's my thoughts on the great rock and roll swindle. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.